So you work here now?
Sir, how may I help you?
Take this!
You really work here? That was the first thing Calvin said. Not, hello. Not, how are you? Coco Bailey looked up from the front desk of the Lux Resort and felt her entire body go still. Not the scared kind of still. The kind that happens when your brain registers danger and your body decides, before you do, that it is not running. Calvin Reed was standing in the middle of the lobby in a navy suit that fit him well, and a smirk that didn't fit him at all anymore. Because the last time Coco saw that smirk, she'd been sitting in a courthouse signing her name to the end of 6 years of her life. And she had told herself, walking out of that building into the cold February air, that she would never let that smirk have power over her again. Here it was, having power over her again. She kept her voice flat, professional. "Do you have a reservation, sir?" Calvin laughed. Actually laughed. The woman on his arm, Brittany, smiled like they were sharing an inside joke. She was wearing Coco's old perfume. Not similar. The exact same one. Coco caught it from 3 feet away and had to work very hard to keep her face neutral. "A reservation," Calvin repeated, like she'd said something hilarious. "Look at you, little Miss Front Desk." He looked around the lobby slowly, performing for an audience that wasn't watching. "This is where you ended up?" Coco put both hands flat on the desk. "Can I help you with something?" "I'm just saying," he shrugged, "after everything. Night shifts at a hotel." He clicked his tongue. "I always said you needed someone looking out for you." The thing about Calvin was that he never shouted when he wanted to hurt you. He got quiet and reasonable and concerned. He dressed cruelty in the clothes of worry so that if you got upset, you looked like the problem. Coco had spent 6 years figuring that out. She wasn't going to forget it now. "I'm going to need you to either state your business or clear the lobby," she said. "We have guests." Brittany stepped forward. "Excuse me, do you know who his family is?" She looked Coco up and down the way people do when they want you to feel small. "You should be grateful he even walked in here." Coco looked at Brittany, calmly, completely. "Ma'am, I need you to lower your voice. Don't ma'am me. I need you." And then Brittany's hand came across the desk and connected with Coco's face. The lobby went silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind that happens when something occurs that nobody's brain has a category for yet. Coco's head turned with the slap. Her cheek burned. She could feel her co-worker Jade freeze somewhere behind her. She could feel the guest at the far end of the desk stop breathing. She straightened slowly, touched her cheek, looked at Brittany, and then she leaned across that desk and slapped Brittany back, clean, firm, no hesitation. "That one was free," Coco said. "The next one comes with a lawsuit." Calvin exploded. He went from 0 to fury in about half a second, the kind of rage that tells you immediately that the concern was never real, that the quiet cruelty was just the version he used when he thought it would work better. Now his voice filled the whole lobby. He was calling her unprofessional, threatening her job, threatening legal action, telling her she had no idea what she was doing or who she was dealing with. And Coco stood there. She didn't shake, she didn't cry, she didn't argue back. She just watched him perform his anger and thought, with a clarity that surprised even her, "I spent 6 years afraid of this man and he's just loud." What happened next, she did not see coming. The elevator behind Calvin opened. A man walked out. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't reacting to the noise. He moved like someone who had decided a long time ago that nothing in the world was worth breaking his pace for. Black coat, dark eyes scanning the room once, just once, and taking in everything. 2 men came out behind him and stopped exactly where he stopped. The lobby didn't just go quiet for this man. It rearranged itself around him. Staff members who had been edging toward the drama suddenly found reasons to look elsewhere. But the noise Calvin was making seemed to lose air, like a balloon with a slow leak. Even Brittany stopped mid-sentence. An Jae-hong walked to the front desk. He didn't look at Calvin immediately. He looked at Coco first, just for a second. Long enough to see that she was standing straight, that she was not broken, that her chin was up. Then he looked at Calvin. "Is there a problem at my front desk?" Calvin turned around, and you could see the exact moment he decided this man was not a threat. The suit was too quiet. The voice was too calm. Calvin had spent his whole life mistaking volume for power. He opened his mouth. He said something, nobody would quite remember what. Something about knowing his rights in a lawsuit and this being a public establishment. Jae-hong looked at him the way you look at something you almost stepped on. Or then he turned to the large man standing 2 steps behind his right shoulder. He didn't say a word, just looked. Calvin and Brittany were out of the building in under 90 seconds. No shouting, no drama, no scene, just gone, like the lobby had quietly corrected a mistake. Jae-hong turned back to Coco. "Are you all right?" She met his eyes without blinking. "I've had worse Tuesdays." And she went back to checking in her guest. If you felt that, if your heart was already racing, you are not alone. Drop a comment right now. Who did Calvin think he was walking in there like that? Before we go any further, if you are new here, welcome to Afro Soul Love Diaries. Hit that subscribe button right now because this story is only getting started. Like this video so more people find it. And stay right here, because what happens next between Coco and that man who just cleared her lobby? Nobody is ready. Nobody on staff talked about who owned the Lux Resort. Not because they didn't know, but because the kind of knowing that comes with working in a building like that is the kind you keep folded up small and tucked somewhere nobody can find it. You come in, you do your job, you go home. You don't ask why certain floors require a separate keycard. You don't ask why some guests check in without luggage and leave before sunrise. You don't ask why the owner works at 2 a.m. like most people work at noon. Coco had figured most of this out in her first 2 weeks. She wasn't scared by it. She was, if she was being honest with herself, a little fascinated. Because she had grown up in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, in a building where the super knew everything about everybody and told you nothing. And she had learned early that the most interesting truths live in the spaces between what people say and what they don't. She'd taken the job because she needed it. Simple as that. 4 months ago, she was sitting on the floor of a Bed-Stuy apartment she'd moved into with 3 suitcases and a broken radiator and absolutely zero plan. The joint account had been emptied before she even knew papers were being filed. Calvin had moved fast, and he had moved quiet. And by the time Coco understood what was happening, she was holding a stack of legal documents and a phone number for a lawyer she couldn't yet afford. She didn't collapse. She didn't call her mother crying, though she wanted to. She sat on that floor for about 45 minutes, looked at the water stain on the ceiling, and then got up and started applying for jobs. The Lux Resort called her back in 3 days. Night shift front desk supervisor. The pay was better than she expected. She said yes before she finished reading the offer. That was 3 months ago. Now she knew every regular by name. She knew which guests liked their keys in an envelope and which ones wanted them handed directly. She knew the housekeeper who came in early because she had a second job starting at 7 a.m. She knew that the kitchen staff made extra food on Fridays and left it in the break room, and that if you got there before midnight, there was still jollof rice. She knew that the man who owned this building came down at odd hours and stood in spaces like he was listening to them. She had seen him exactly 4 times before the lobby incident. Once by the elevator, once outside the business center, once at the end of the hallway on the 3rd floor doing something she couldn't quite see, once through the glass of his office when the door was cracked. Each time he looked like a man carrying something heavy that he'd been carrying so long he didn't notice the weight anymore. She had not spoken to him before tonight, after Calvin and Brittany were removed and the lobby settled back into its normal rhythm. Coco finished her shift with the particular focus of someone who has decided not to let something land until they're somewhere private. Jade kept glancing at her. She ignored it in the most affectionate way possible. At 1:15 a.m., she was in the break room eating leftover jollof from a small container she'd brought from home, the kind her mother made that tasted like Sunday, regardless of what day it was. The building was down to its nighttime frequency, the particular hum of a large space mostly at rest. She heard footsteps that didn't belong to anyone on the night crew. Jae-hong appeared in the break room doorway. He was still in the black coat. He looked like he hadn't stopped moving since she last saw him, which given what she knew about his schedule was probably accurate. He looked at her, then at the food, then back at her. She did not hide the container. She capped it calmly, set her fork down, and said, "Mr. An." He didn't say anything immediately. He looked around the break room like he was seeing it for the first time, or which, she suspected, he probably was. "You're still here," he said. "Jade had a family situation. I covered the rest of her shift." He nodded once. Something in his expression moved, so briefly she almost missed it. He stayed in the doorway, not quite entering, not quite leaving, which was, she was learning, a very An Jae-hong thing to do. "You do that a lot," she said. He looked at her. "Do what?" "Stand in rooms and watch people. You stare like you're deciding who to bury." The silence that followed was very long. And then An Jae-hong laughed. Not a polite laugh, not a professional courtesy laugh. A real one, the kind that comes from somewhere unexpected and surprises the person producing it as much as everyone around them. His two associates standing just outside the doorway exchanged a look that said, clearly, that they had not heard that sound in a very long time. Coco raised an eyebrow. "Was that a laugh? Hold on, let me mark the date." He composed himself, but the corner of his mouth stayed up, just slightly, like it didn't quite know how to come back down. "You're not afraid of me," he said. "I just got divorced," she said. "I'm eating reheated jollof at 1 a.m. and my radiator sounds like it's filing a noise complaint. Respectfully, sir, you are not even in my top 5 concerns right now." He looked at her for a long moment, the kind of look that isn't rude but isn't casual either, the kind that means someone is actually seeing you, which is rarer than it should be. "Good night, Miss Bailey. Good night, Mr. An." He left. She listened to his footsteps go back down the corridor. She sat alone in the break room for another minute, staring at nothing. Then she picked up her fork and went back to her jollof. "Can we just pause here for a second? Because this woman just got slapped in her own workplace, slapped back with zero apology, and then held a full conversation with one of the most powerful men in Manhattan like it was a regular Tuesday. Drop a comment and tell me, are you Team Coco yet? Because if you're not, you're about to be. Like this video and keep watching because this story is going somewhere nobody is ready for." The next 2 weeks were quiet in the way that things are quiet right before they aren't. Coco worked her shifts. She got better at reading the building, who came in nervous, who left relieved, which floor got more activity on which nights. She didn't ask questions. She filed information in the back of her head the way she had learned to file everything, quietly, neatly, available when needed. Jae-hong came down 4 more times during her shift, each time with some version of a professional reason. Each time he ended up at the front desk. Each time the conversation went somewhere neither of them had planned. He asked her once why she hadn't mentioned her marketing background when she interviewed. She told him she hadn't wanted it to look like she was overqualified for the position she was applying for, because overqualified meant risky, and she needed the job. He said, "That's a very calculated answer." She said, "I'm a very calculating person." He said, "I know." She stopped. "How do you know?" "You've restructured the way the front desk handles late check-ins without being asked. You remember every regular's name and preference without writing it down, and you covered Jade's shift without logging it as overtime." She stared at him. "You've been watching me work." "I watch everyone who works in my building. That's either very professional or very unsettling." "Probably both," he said, and walked away. She stood at the desk for a moment, just looking at the space he'd left. Her co-worker Jade appeared from the back. "Did he just... was that... Coco?" Did the man almost smile? "Mind your desk, Jade." "I am minding my desk. My desk has eyes." Meanwhile, on the other side of Manhattan, Calvin Reed was having a very different kind of night. He was sitting in his car outside a bar he didn't go into on a street 2 blocks from the Lux Resort, going through his phone. Specifically going through photos. Specifically photos of Coco, not recent ones, old ones, from inside the marriage. The thing that kept circling his head, the thing he couldn't get rid of, was the image of her standing behind that desk, the way she'd looked, not like the woman he remembered, The one who got quieter over the years, who stopped pushing back, who had learned to read his moods from across a room. She looked like someone else entirely, like someone who had exhaled for the first time after years of holding their breath. It bothered him in ways he didn't have the self-awareness to name. He told himself it was concern. He was good at telling himself that. He called the number of a man he'd been using for about 2 years. The call was answered on the second ring. He asked for an update on her schedule. The man gave it to him. He sat in that car for another 20 minutes, just thinking. Then he drove home. And the next morning, he walked into the coffee shop 2 blocks from the Lux Resort at 7:42 a.m. and sat at a table near the window where he could see the street. Coco walked past at 7:55 a.m., headphones in, coffee cup from home, moving like someone who had somewhere to be and was annoyed at the distance between here and there. She didn't see him. He watched her walk until she turned the corner. He told himself it was just checking in. Back at the Lux, Jae-hong sat in his top-floor office at a desk that had 3 monitors and a view of the city that most people would pay significant money just to look at for 5 minutes. He was reading a report that one of his associates had placed in front of him 20 minutes ago. He had read it 3 times. It was a routine internal security summary. Guest patterns, staff flagged behaviors, nothing unusual. Except there was one line, a notation that an unidentified male had been seen outside the building twice in the past 10 days. Different times, different positions on the street, but the same man. Jae-hong had asked for the security footage. He recognized Calvin Reed from the lobby. From the night he'd walked in with that particular swagger of a man who mistakes his own noise for strength. From the night he'd raised his voice at Coco's front desk. He looked at the footage for a long time. Then he opened a different drawer and made a phone call that was not on the hotel's main line. He didn't say much. He gave a name. He said he wanted a full picture. He said, "Take your time and be thorough." Then he went back to his reports. He told himself it was just standard security protocol. Back in Bed-Stuy, Coco was on FaceTime with her best friend Naomi, lying on her couch, phone propped against a pillow, reading Calvin's latest text message out loud in the most dramatic voice she could manage. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, Coco. I know I wasn't perfect. I know I let you down. But seeing you the other night..." She stopped. "Naomi, he said seeing you the other night. He came there on purpose to humiliate me, and now he's calling it seeing me." Naomi, who was eating chips on her end of the call, shook her head slowly. The audacity is clinically impressive. Right, like he has earned a case study. "What are you going to do?" Coco put the phone down on her chest and looked at the ceiling. The radiator hissed, or the window let in a thin line of cold air from where it didn't close all the way. "Nothing," she said. "I'm going to do nothing, because he wants a reaction. He has always wanted a reaction. The best thing I can do is be so unbothered it makes him crazy." "That's very evolved of you." "Thank you. I've been working on it." "Are you okay, though, actually?" Coco was quiet for a second, a real second. "I saw his face when he walked in, Naomi. He looked satisfied, like finding me there proved something he'd been telling himself, and I just..." She stopped. "I spent so long trying to be enough for him, and he used every single thing I gave him as evidence that I wasn't." "Coco, I'm fine. I'm actually fine. I just needed to say it out loud." "You sure?" "Positive. Also, the man who owns my job just cleared Calvin out of the lobby like a bouncer removes a drunk guy, so honestly the night ended well." Naomi sat up. "Wait. Back up. What man?" Coco didn't tell Naomi everything about Jae-hong, not because she was hiding something, there was nothing yet to hide, but because saying certain things out loud makes them more real, and she wasn't sure she was ready for that particular kind of real. She said her boss handled the situation. She said, "He's very calm." She said, "He's not what you'd expect." Naomi, who had known Coco since the 7th grade and could read her the way most people read large print books, said nothing. Just looked at her through the phone screen with both eyebrows slightly raised. "What?" Coco said. "Nothing," Naomi said. "That face is not nothing. I'm just listening. You're doing the face. I don't have a face." "Naomi." "Coco, I'm just saying, He's not what you'd expect is a very specific thing to say about your boss. Coco pointed at the camera. Mind your business. Naomi laughed. That's not a denial. Coco ended the FaceTime. She lay on her couch in the dark for a while, listening to the city outside and the radiator and her own thoughts, which were busier than she preferred. She thought about Jae Hong standing in the break room doorway with his hands in his coat pockets, the laugh, the way he'd said, "I know," like her competence was something he'd already quietly catalogued. She thought about Calvin sending texts from whatever apartment he was in, rearranging the truth of what he did into a shape that let him sleep at night. She thought about the woman she'd been at 26 when she met Calvin, open, ambitious, funny, certain of herself in the way young people are before someone spends years quietly convincing them otherwise. She missed that woman. She was working on finding her again. She fell asleep on the couch with the television on. The next week, Jae Hong found a reason to change a hotel policy. The policy was about how late arriving guests were handled at the front desk. A rigid process that Coco had told him, in the most professional language she could manage, was inefficient and made guests feel like they were being processed rather than welcomed. She found out about the change through the updated staff memo. She read it twice to make sure she was understanding correctly. Then she looked directly at the lobby camera, the one angled at the front desk, and mouthed very clearly, "You're welcome." In his office, Jae Hong watched the footage and the corner of his mouth moved. He watched it again. Then he closed the monitor and went back to work. 2 days later, he appeared at the front desk just before midnight. Coco was in the middle of reorganizing the guest information folders in a way that made more sense to her than the original system. She didn't stop when he arrived. She kept working and talked to him sideways. "I saw the memo," she said. "The policy needed updating." "It did. I said so 2 weeks ago." "You did. And now you're here because I'm doing a building walk." She glanced at him at 11:52 p.m. "I work late. I've noticed." She closed the last folder and turned to face him. "Can I ask you something?" He waited. "Why do you work this late? You own the building. You own several buildings. You could have people doing all of this." He was quiet for a moment. "I have people doing most of it. But not all of it. No, not all of it." She waited. He looked like he was deciding how much to give. "When you build something," he said, "and I mean actually build it from the inside out, you don't stop being able to feel when something's wrong. You can have 100 people watching it for you, but there are things you only catch yourself at night, when everything else is quiet." Coco looked at him for a moment. "That's the loneliest thing I've ever heard, and you said it like it was completely normal." He blinked. "That's not an insult," she said quickly. "It's just, you're describing carrying something by yourself when you don't have to. Some things have to be carried by yourself." "Some," she agreed, "not all." He looked at her with that particular look again, the one that meant he was actually seeing her. "Good night, Miss Bailey. Good night, Mr. Ahn." She paused. "The memo was the right call, by the way. The guests will feel it." He was almost to the elevator. "I know," he said, without turning around. She watched the elevator close. Jade materialized from somewhere behind the desk like she had been there the whole time, which she had. "Coco." "Jade. That man just had a whole conversation with you about loneliness." He was talking about business operations. He was talking about loneliness, Coco. I have ears. I went to school. Coco straightened her blazer and picked up her pen. "There's a guest coming in at midnight. Can you pull up the reservation?" "This conversation is not over." "The reservation, Jade." Calvin came back. Not to the Lux this time. He was smart enough to understand that particular door had been closed with a kind of authority that didn't leave room for appeals. But he started appearing in the geography of Coco's life with a frequency that stopped being coincidence around the third time. The coffee shop, her dry cleaner on Fulton Street, a restaurant she'd mentioned to him once, 18 months ago, in passing, where she was meeting Naomi for dinner. He was at the bar when they arrived. He came over smiling like it was the most natural thing in the world. Coco, Naomi, a small world. Naomi looked at him with the expression of a woman who has heard about you in great detail and none of it was flattering. Coco looked at him calmly. Calvin, I was hoping I'd run into you. I've been thinking about what I said in my texts. I didn't read them, she said, fully. I skimmed. Something moved across his face. I'm trying to have a real conversation. I know you are, she said, and I'm telling you genuinely that I don't have one to give you. I'm having dinner with my friend. Enjoy your evening. She turned back to Naomi. Calvin stood there for 2 seconds, just long enough for the rejection to arrange itself fully, and then walked back to the bar. Naomi waited until he was out of earshot. Girl, don't. I'm just saying, the growth. Naomi, what I need the breadbasket, and I need you to stop looking at me like that. The breadbasket is coming. The look is staying. She was almost fine. She was handling it the way she handled everything, with humor at the front and real processing happening somewhere quieter behind it. But alone, later, she sat with the truth she didn't say out loud, even to Naomi, that some part of her remembered loving him. Not the Calvin who showed up in the lobby, but the one from the beginning who used to know her coffee order and drive across Brooklyn at midnight because she called him sad. That person had felt real. The grief of losing a person who turned out not to exist is a specific kind of grief. She wasn't ashamed of it. She just put it behind her. What she didn't know, what she had absolutely no way of knowing, was that at that exact moment, in a folder in Jae-hong's top-floor office, there was a private investigator's report that had been delivered that afternoon. He hadn't read it yet. He was going to read it that night. And what was in it was going to change everything. Jae-hong read the report at 1:17 a.m. He sat at his desk, city lights behind him through the floor-to-ceiling glass, and he read it once all the way through. Then he went back to the beginning and read it again. Slower. The private investigator his people had tracked down wasn't hard to find. The firm had a pattern, the kind of business that stays just inside legal boundaries and charges accordingly. They had been on retainer for Calvin Reed for just over 2 years, during the marriage. Of the active surveillance of Coco's daily movements had started 14 months into their relationship and never fully stopped. There were location logs, daily ones, her subway patterns, her work schedule at the time, the coffee shop, the gym she went to on Saturday mornings, the times she called her mother, who she had lunch with, her routes home. There were photographs, taken from distance. Coco on a street corner, Coco at a restaurant, Coco laughing at something on her phone, none of it intimate, all of it deeply wrong. And at the bottom of the report, a line that made something cold and focused settle in Jae-hong's chest. The firm was still active, still filing. Reports had continued after the divorce. He closed the folder. He sat for a while. He was not a man who felt things loudly. His world had trained that out of him early. His grandfather's world, then his father's, then his own. You read a situation. You assess. You act. Feeling was a step in the process, not the whole process. But sitting with that folder, thinking about the woman downstairs who laughed like she meant it and ate Jollof at 1 a.m. and told him things that nobody else had said to him in years, the cold focus in his chest had a temperature to it, the kind that meant you were going to do something about this. He didn't rush. He never did. He put the folder in his desk drawer and went to bed. 3 days later, he asked Coco to stay after her shift ended. He met her in one of the private dining rooms on the 2nd floor, not his office, because his office would have felt like a power play, and he was deliberate about those distinctions. He sat across from her at a table with nothing on it except the folder. He slid it across without introduction. She looked at him, then at the folder. Then she opened it. She was quiet for a long time. Not the performative quiet of someone processing in public, the genuine kind, where you can see a person go inward, past the sharp exterior, into the place where things actually land. She turned a page, looked at a photograph of herself that she didn't know existed, taken on a Tuesday afternoon when she thought she was just walking home. She turned another page, read a location log entry that covered 31 consecutive days of her movements, meal times, departure times, who she spoke to, routes, all of it documented with a clinical precision that made her feel simultaneously watched and erased. She closed the folder. He never stopped, Jae-hong said quietly. The firm is still active. She looked at the table. Her jaw was set in the way it went when she was managing something that deserved more room than she was giving it. How did you get this? She asked. I looked. When someone comes into my building to cause that kind of scene, I look. I'm not your... I know, he said, before she could finish it. You're not my employee in the way this would be standard. I know that. I looked because... He stopped, chose his words. Because I wanted to understand what you were dealing with, and because the man came back, twice, outside the building, and that concerned me. She looked up. He held her gaze. He's been outside twice since the lobby incident, different times, always watching the entrance. She was very still now. Oh, Coco. He said her name for the first time without the formality, just her name, quiet and direct. How did he know you worked here? She stared at him, and then, because she was Coco Bailey and her brain did not stop working even when her heart was doing something complicated, she asked herself the question properly, turned it over, looked at it from the right angle. She had not posted about this job, not on any platform. She had told 2 people, Naomi and her mother. The recruiter was bound by confidentiality. She'd signed nothing that would have made this public. She had been deliberate about keeping her life compartmentalized while she rebuilt it. I didn't tell him, she said slowly. No. I didn't tell anyone outside of... She stopped. Someone told him, Jae-hong said, or someone told someone who told him. Either way. He didn't find you by coincidence. The room was very quiet. Someone in this building, she said. He didn't answer immediately, which was its own answer. She sat back. The thing that was moving through her right now wasn't fear, exactly. It was something harder and cleaner than fear. It was the particular fury of a woman who realizes that she has been used as a piece in a game she didn't know was being played. So he didn't just show up, she said. Someone handed him the information. That's what I believe. Which means you have someone on your staff. Yes. She looked at him. He looked back. And in that moment something shifted between them. Not the soft, warm shift of 2 people falling together. The sharp, clear shift of 2 people recognizing that they are in the same situation and they trust each other. Wait, what are you going to do? She asked. Find out who and why. He paused. And I need you to stay out of it. This is not your world and I don't want it touching you more than it already has. She nodded. He watched her nod. He knew, in the precise way he knew most things, that she was not going to stay out of it. He said goodnight. She said goodnight. She went back downstairs. At the front desk, she stood for a moment looking at the lobby, at the staff moving around her, at the keycard panels on the walls, at the doors and corridors and systems she'd been navigating for 3 months without fully realizing she'd been memorizing them. Jade appeared. You okay? Mm-hmm. You have your thinking face. I have one face, Jade. You have at least 4, and this is the scary one. Coco picked up a pen, started her end-of-shift checklist. Normal, routine, completely unremarkable. Her mind was already working. How do you find a person in a building full of people who are all pretending to be exactly who they're supposed to be? You watch for the moments when the pretending slips. You look at patterns. You ask what doesn't fit. She had been watching this building for 3 months. She was very good at watching. Now she just had to figure out what she'd already seen without knowing she was looking. She started with what she knew. Every person on the hotel staff had access to certain systems. The front desk team, which included her, had access to guest reservations, room assignments, and basic staff schedules. Management had access to payroll systems and HR records. Department heads had broader access, depending on their role. Her onboarding had been handled by one person. But she remembered it clearly because the man had been efficient in an odd way, not warm, not cold, just precise. Like he was checking boxes. His name was Victor, guest services manager, 12 years with the hotel, quiet, professional, the kind of person you stopped noticing because he moved through the building without friction. She had never thought about him twice. She started thinking about him now. She didn't change her behavior. That was the first rule of watching someone who might be watching back. You don't show your hand. She came in for her shifts, she did her job, she talked to Jade about nothing important, she laughed in the break room. But she started clocking Victor's movements. It was easy on night shift, the building thinned out. Their patterns became visible the way they weren't during the busy daytime hours when everyone was moving and the noise covered everything. Late at night, a person's habits become almost musical, predictable rhythms that play the same way every time. Victor's rhythm was slightly off. Not in a way you'd notice if you weren't paying attention, but Coco was paying a very particular kind of attention now. His keycard swipes, she could see them on the front desk system, which logged access points for security purposes, showed him in sections of the building that didn't match his scheduled duties. Not every night, but 3, 4 times a week. Between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., the same windows. She memorized the times without writing them down. Then she started cross-referencing. The guest log was part of her front desk access. She went through 6 months of it slowly, during quiet moments in her shift, looking for nothing specific and everything unusual. She found a pattern in about a week, a set of guest names that rotated through. Different people, different stays, seemingly unconnected. But the same 3 corporate cards processed them, 3 cards registered to company names she didn't recognize. She took out her personal phone and photographed the screen. She did this over 3 nights. Unhurried. Patient. She wasn't sure yet what she had, but she had been raised by a woman who said, "When something feels wrong, collect evidence before you open your mouth, because feelings don't win arguments. Facts do." She had facts. She found Jae Hong at 1:10 a.m. on a Thursday, heading from the elevator to his office. She fell into step beside him without being invited, which surprised his security enough that they moved before remembering she was staff. She held up her phone. He looked at the photographs. He said nothing. He kept walking. She kept pace with him. He pushed open his office door and she followed him in. He looked at the photographs again, more carefully this time, scrolled through them, set the phone down on his desk, and looked at the ceiling briefly in the way people do when they are absorbing something they'd rather not be absorbing. "How did you get these?" he asked. "They're in the front desk guest system, which I'm authorized to access. I told you to stay out of this." "You did," she said. "And then I thought about it. And I thought, someone in this building handed my personal information to a man who spent 2 years secretly photographing me without my knowledge. And I'm supposed to sit at the front desk and act like that's not something I need to understand." She looked at him. "I'm not built for that. I want you to know that about me." He looked at her for a long moment. "Victor," she said. "Guest services manager. His keycard access doesn't match his duties. 3 to 4 nights a week, between 11 and 1. He processed my onboarding. He had full access to my schedule and contact information. You mapped his keycard movements. I work nights. I have a good memory and access to the same security system that logs everyone's access points." He sat down. Not heavily. He never did anything heavily, but he sat down. "Coco, I know. These corporate cards." He tapped her phone screen. "Do you know what these are? I know I can't trace them from my access level. You can." He picked up his desk phone, made a call, said 4 words in Korean and a set of numbers she'd photographed. Then he set it down. They sat across from each other in silence for a minute. "The rival organization has a name," he said. "You don't need to know it. What you need to know is that they've been trying to dismantle certain parts of my American operations for 2 years. Legitimate channels, business interference, information leaks." He paused. "Victor has been inside this organization for 12 years. Oh, I built certain parts of this hotel around his access. Which makes him valuable to anyone who wants to hurt you." "Yes." "And he leaked my schedule to Calvan to create a scene in your lobby. On a specific night, when I had associates in the building for a meeting. A public disruption in the lobby on that night would have been documented, would have suggested to certain parties that security at the Lux was compromised, that I couldn't control my own house." He looked at her. "You were not a target, you were a prop." She sat with that for a moment. The word prop, used without knowing, without consenting, without any idea that the man she'd been trying to get away from had been turned into a weapon aimed at someone else, with her in the middle. "Calvin doesn't know any of this," she said. "He was just..." Convenient. A man with an existing obsession and easy access to your information. He didn't need to understand what he was being used for. He just needed to show up. She stood up, walked to the window, looked out at Manhattan at 1 a.m., all those lit windows, all those lives happening simultaneously, the city doing what the city does. What happens to Victor? She asked. That's being handled. And Calvin? Jae-hong was quiet for a moment. That's also being handled. She turned. I need to know what handled means. He met her eyes. Nothing you'd need to testify to. That's not reassuring. It's honest. She looked at him. He looked back. Neither of them looked away. I need you to hear me when I say I don't want him hurt, she said. Calvin he's a controlling person who made choices that hurt me badly. But he's also someone who got used by people who were way above his understanding. I don't want his blood on anything connected to me. I hear you, Jae-hong said. Do you? I do, he said, quietly but certain. Coco, I hear you. She held his gaze for another second. Then she nodded, picked up her phone from his desk. I need to get back to the front desk, she said. I have a guest checking in at 2. Of course. She was at the door. She stopped, didn't fully turn around. Victor trusted you for 12 years, she said. I'm sorry. The room was very quiet. Good night, Miss Bailey, he said. She left. He sat alone in his office for a long time, looking at the city. Victor was removed from the Lux on a Friday morning. No scene, no confrontation in the lobby, no dramatic moment that staff could carry home as a story. How he simply wasn't there on Saturday. His desk was cleared. HR sent a brief internal memo about a departmental restructuring. Nobody asked too many questions because in a building like the Lux, you learned quickly that some questions were not questions. They were invitations to trouble. Jade noticed his absence. Victor's gone, she said to Coco quietly during a slow moment at the desk. Coco said, just like that. Friday he's here, Monday he's not. People leave jobs, Jade. Jade looked at her sideways. You know something. I know that we have a VIP arriving at noon and the room upgrade hasn't been confirmed. This conversation is going to happen eventually. The room upgrade, Jade. Jade went to confirm the room upgrade. Coco stood at the desk with her hands flat on the surface, looking at nothing in particular, and let herself feel the specific relief of a threat that has been quietly removed. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just the exhale of tension leaving a space it had occupied for too long. The Shin Syndicate's play collapsed, not with an explosion, but with a series of quiet removals, the way Jae-hong did everything. Certain guest accounts were closed, certain access points were deactivated. His associates, the ones she'd seen but never been introduced to, moved through the building for 2 days, and then were gone. The Lux went back to its rhythm. Calvin's undoing happened the way Coco had predicted it would, which was the way all real consequences happen, not in one dramatic moment, but in a sequence of ordinary ones that add up to something irreversible. The PI reports from inside the marriage went to her divorce attorney, who had things to say about the legality of sustained surveillance of a spouse. The PI firm lost 3 significant contracts within 48 hours. Calvin's employer, a financial firm, received a compliance review request through channels that had nothing visibly to do with Jae-hong or the Lux. The review was routine on paper. In practice, it made life significantly complicated. Coco found out about this in pieces, not because Jae-hong reported back to her, he didn't, but because Naomi called her one Tuesday night, sounding both gleeful and slightly afraid. Coco, Calvin called me. Coco set down her mug. Why? He's in some kind of trouble. Something about his firm. Something about the PI people he used. Naomi paused. He wanted me to tell you that he's sorry and that he knows you did something. Coco was quiet for a moment. I didn't do anything. That's literally what he said. He said, what did you do? And I'm asking you the same question. Naomi, I went to work every night and did my job. Long pause. Your job is very interesting, Naomi said finally. It pays well, Coco agreed. Calvin sent one last text. She read it the way you read something you already know the ending to. I know you had something to do with this. This isn't over. She typed back, Calvin, I didn't do anything. That's what your choices look like without me absorbing them for you. She blocked his number. She put her phone in her pocket and stood in her apartment, her small, imperfect, broken radiator apartment in Bed-Stuy, and breathed. Outside, Brooklyn was doing what Brooklyn did. Noise and life and the particular music of a neighborhood that doesn't perform for anybody. She felt lighter than she had in 4 years. That weekend, Jae-hong asked her to come up to his office. Not during a shift. On her day off. He sent the message through the hotel's internal system, formally, correctly, and said it was entirely her choice. She came. He had coffee waiting. He was in a simpler version of himself on weekends, still precise, still contained, but something in the edges of him was slightly less defended. She noticed this. She noticed most things about him now. They sat across from each other and talked for 3 hours. Not about the hotel, not about Victor or Calvin or the Shin Syndicate. They talked about the things that make people who they actually are, underneath all the armor they've built up. She told him about her mother, about Crown Heights. About the particular education of growing up in a household where money was always the subtext of every conversation, not complained about, just present, shaping every decision from what you ate to which path home you took at night. He listened the way he did everything, completely, no half attention, no performance of listening, actually present. He told her about his father, carefully, in pieces, about inheriting a world at 28 that he hadn't chosen and couldn't refuse, about the particular loneliness of being the person everyone needs to be something for, strong, certain, in control, until you almost forget there's a person underneath the function. She said, Did you ever want something different? He was quiet for a long time. I had a plan, he said, before all of this. He gestured, vaguely, at the hotel, at the city, at all of it. I was working towards something, quietly, a way out that didn't leave damage behind. She looked at him. And then... He met her eyes. And then things became complicated. She felt something shift in her chest, not the romantic kind of shift, something deeper, the kind that happens when you understand a person in a way that has weight. Jae-hong. Yes. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer it honestly. Always. Did protecting me, all of this, did it pull you back into something you were trying to leave? He didn't look away. Yes. She sat with that. One word, the most honest one he could have given. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be. I didn't ask you to. You didn't, he said. That's exactly the point. You didn't ask me to do anything. I chose to. Because when I'm honest with myself, and you've made it very difficult to be anything else, I didn't want to leave this building anymore. I wanted to stay in it, with you in it. He paused. That's the most complicated thing anyone has ever done to me, Coco Bailey, and you did it by eating jollof at 1 a.m. and telling me I look like I'm deciding who to bury. She stared at him. Then she laughed. The real laugh, full and unperformed. And he sat across from her watching it like it was the only thing in the city worth looking at. You're in love with me, she said, not a question. I am, he said, simply. You told me you wanted to leave organized crime, and instead you went to war for me. The war was already coming. You just gave me a reason to win it. She shook her head slowly. That's either the most romantic or most alarming thing I've ever heard. Probably both, he said, the same thing she'd said to him weeks ago in the break room. She caught it, smiled. Give me time, she said. You can have all of it, he said. She stood, put on her jacket, picked up her bag. At the door she stopped, turned around. For the record, she said, I haven't eaten jollof alone since we had that first conversation. I keep bringing enough for 2 and forgetting that you don't actually come to the break room anymore. She left. He sat very still for about 30 seconds. Then he picked up his phone and texted his assistant to clear his 1 a.m. schedule for the rest of the month. She didn't say yes that weekend, or the next one, not because she wasn't sure of her feelings. Those had been clear to her for a while. Oh, if she was being honest in the way that feelings become clear when you stop fighting the evidence. She didn't say yes because she was a woman who had learned, at significant personal cost, the difference between being ready to want something and being ready to have it. She needed to be ready to have it. So she went back to her life, her shifts, her apartment, her mornings. She called her mother in Crown Heights and sat on the couch listening to her mother's voice fill the kitchen of the apartment she'd grown up in. And she didn't mention Jae-hong because her mother would immediately know everything, and Coco wasn't ready for that particular conversation. She thought about who she was now versus who she'd been when she met Calvin. At 26, she'd been brilliant and hungry and a little bit afraid of her own edges, the way ambitious young women sometimes are, when the world is constantly suggesting that being too much is a problem. Calvin had seemed like an anchor. He'd seemed like certainty. What he actually was, she understood now, was a ceiling dressed up as a foundation. She thought about Jae-hong, not the power, not the hotel, not the world he operated in. The man who changed a policy because she was right, who listened when she talked like he was actually interested in what she was building, not what she could become for him, who put a confession on the table like a legal document and said, "Take your time," and meant it. The morning after their third weekend conversation, she sat at her kitchen table with coffee, looking at her own hands. She thought, I am not the woman from those PI photographs, the one who moved through her own life being documented without her knowledge, small and monitored. She was not that woman anymore. She had rebuilt herself in a Bed-Stuy apartment with a broken radiator and a night shift job, and she had found the mole, and she had stood in rooms with powerful people and not flinched, and she had slapped back. She thought, choosing him isn't going back to being chosen. It's choosing for myself. She picked up her phone, typed, I'm not going anywhere either. 3 dots appeared. Then, good. She put the phone down, looked out the window at Brooklyn doing its Saturday morning thing, smiled, real and full and completely unperformed. She went to work that evening with something settled in her that hadn't been settled in a long time. Jae-hong was at the front desk at midnight. He didn't pretend to have a reason. He was just there, leaning against the side of the desk, like a man who has decided he's allowed to be somewhere without an official justification. Which was, she thought, probably the most human she'd ever seen him look. You texted me, she said, without looking up from what she was doing. You texted me, he corrected, and you said good, which is the least romantic response in human history. I'm working on it. You have time. She finished what she was writing, looked up at him. How did it feel? To send it? He thought about it. Like something heavy came down. She nodded. Yeah, she paused. That's what relief feels like, I forgot. They looked at each other across the desk. Jade, somewhere in the back, was making sounds that suggested she was deliberately not coming out. Coco made a mental note to address that later. I want to take you to dinner, Jae-hong said. A real one, not the hotel, somewhere outside. In public? In public. People will talk. Let them. She tilted her head. You're sure about that? Because you are a very private person and I am a very real person, he said. I know. That's why. She considered it. Where? Wherever you want. That's a big offer from a man who probably has opinions about restaurants. I have opinions about most things. I'm choosing to defer to you on this one. Because you've been in this city rebuilding your life for 4 months, and you've been doing it on your own terms, and I want to take you somewhere that feels like yours, not mine. She was very quiet for a moment, and then she said, There's a Senegalese place in Harlem that my mother has been telling me about for 2 years, and I've never been. Saturday, he said. Saturday, she agreed. He straightened up, was about to leave. Jae-hong. He turned. The exit plan, she said, carefully. The properties, the trust structure. Are you still? It's been paused, he said, not cancelled. What does paused mean? It means I have things to finish before I can walk away cleanly. It means I'm not going to rush it. And it means... He stopped. It means that what I'm walking toward matters more to me now than the walking away did, which changes the timeline but not the direction. She looked at him for a long moment. Okay, she said. Okay? I'm not going to pretend that's simple. It's not. Oh, your world is complicated, and I know that, and I'm not going to act like I don't. But you told me the truth. You could have let me believe it was all resolved, and you didn't. That matters. He held her gaze. With you, I don't know how to be anything but honest. I've tried. You make it impossible. That might be the nicest thing you've said to me. I'll try to do better. Saturday dinner will be a good start. He left. She turned back to her desk. Jade materialized immediately. Coco. Jade. Saturday dinner? You were listening. I was breathing in the same building. That's not listening. That's just existence. Jade grabbed her arm. Saturday dinner, Coco, in Harlem. Jade. We have work. I need a moment to process this. You have until the next check-in arrives. That's 12 minutes. Then you have 12 minutes. Jade made a sound that was not a word and went back to her station. Coco stood at the desk, fighting the smile that was trying very hard to be on her face. She lost the fight. She let it be there, full and real and completely her own. Outside, Manhattan moved the way it always did, indifferent and electric and alive. 42 floors above the street, in a penthouse office with a city view that most people would pay anything to see, a man who had spent years building walls and losing himself inside them sat with his phone in his hand and a text that said, "I'm not going anywhere either," and felt, for the first time in longer than he could clearly remember, like something had returned to him that he'd stopped expecting to find. Neither of them was naive. His world was real and complicated and would not become simple overnight. She was still rebuilding. He was still unraveling something that took decades to weave. But there was a Saturday dinner in Harlem. And that was a beginning. That was enough. 6 weeks later, 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. The Lux Resort lobby, warm gold light, marble floors, the specific quiet of a building that has returned to itself after everything that tried to disturb it. Coco Bailey stood behind the front desk. The blazer was pressed. Her name tag was straight. Her spine was the straightest thing in the room. She looked like exactly who she was, not who she'd been made smaller into, not who she'd been photographed from a distance without her knowledge, not the woman from the courthouse in February holding a stack of legal documents and a lawyer's number she couldn't yet afford. She looked like Coco Bailey, fully, finally, without anything taken out. A guest approached the desk, mid-50s, tired from travel, the kind of tired that's in the eyes more than the posture. "Welcome to the Lux Resort," Coco said, warm and real. "Let's get you checked in." She moved through the check-in with the efficiency of someone who has done this hundreds of times and still treats each one like it's the first. She remembered the guest's name without being reminded. She noted the preference on the reservation. High floor, our quiet side, and upgraded the room without being asked because she could see the man needed the rest. She handed over the keycard with both hands, which was a small gesture but intentional. "If there's anything you need, anything at all, we're here," she said. The guest smiled, the real kind. "Thank you, I mean it." He walked toward the elevator. Coco watched him go and felt the particular satisfaction of doing something well, not for recognition, just because it deserved to be done well. Jade appeared at her elbow. "Room 3, 812, called about the thermostat again. I'll call maintenance. Also, the flowers in the east corridor need replacing. I'll tell housekeeping. Also," Jade stopped, got a specific look on her face. Coco already knew. She felt it before she turned. The way the lobby rearranged itself. Or the way the staff straightened without being told. The way the air pressure subtly shifted. The elevator opened. Ahn Jae-hong walked out. Black coat, dark eyes doing what they always did, scanning the room once, completely, missing nothing. His two associates flanked him at the standard distance they'd learned to maintain when he was in the lobby, and there was a reason they should give him room. He crossed the lobby. He didn't stop at the desk. He wasn't heading to the desk. He was heading to the exit. A meeting, probably, the kind that happened at 10 p.m. and didn't get logged on the official calendar. But he passed the front desk, and as he passed, he looked at Coco, just for a moment. The look was small and private and had nothing to do with the hotel or the lobby or any of the people in the room. It was the look of a man communicating something to a specific person that nobody else was meant to receive. She raised one eyebrow in response. The smallest possible movement. The corner of his mouth lifted. Barely. Just enough. He kept walking, out through the lobby, through the door, into the Manhattan night. Jade was vibrating beside her. He did it again. Did what? The look, Coco. He looked at you like nothing, Jade. He's the owner of the building. He looks at everything. He looked at the plant by the door, too. He did not look at the plant like that. Coco picked up her pen, started her checklist. Mind your desk, she said. You know what? I'm going to get this embroidered on a pillow so I stop being surprised when you say it. Jade. Minding my desk. Minding my desk. Coco smiled at her checklist. Like the real smile, full and unguarded and completely hers. Later, when the lobby had quieted and the building had settled into its nighttime frequency, she stood for a moment at the desk and looked around at the space she had come to know better than anywhere else she'd been in the past year. She knew every corner of it, every person who worked it, every pattern and rhythm and small daily truth of it. She had come here broken and in need of something stable. She had found something she hadn't expected, not just stability, but herself. The self she'd been slowly losing for 6 years, the one who was sharp and funny and several steps ahead and not sorry about any of it. She thought about the woman in the PI photographs, moving through her life being documented, unaware, managed. She thought about the woman who had found the mole before the man with an entire organization behind him. She thought about a man who had been planning a quiet exit from a world that had never asked him if he wanted to be in it, who had been carrying the weight of an inherited life for so long he'd forgotten it wasn't supposed to be permanent, who met a woman eating reheated jollof at 1 a.m. and laughed for the first time in 4 years and could not explain why, except that she told him the truth and didn't flinch and challenged him on a hotel policy and turned out to be the kind of person you don't choose to leave behind. She thought about what it meant that he was staying, the complexity of it, the reality of his world and the slowness of real change and the fact that easy was never the thing she'd asked for. She'd asked for honest, and he gave her honest every time. She could work with honest. She had built a whole life on less. Outside, Manhattan did what Manhattan does. Cabs honked on 57th Street. Tourists moved in packs toward Times Square. A siren somewhere below spiked and faded. Or the city was indifferent to everything inside the Lux, to the woman at the front desk who had walked in here broken and was leaving each night more whole, to the man in a black coat who had walked out 20 minutes ago toward a complicated world he was quietly preparing to leave, to the story that had started with a slap and ended with a text message that said, "I'm not going anywhere either," and meant something real. The city didn't care about any of that. But Coco did, and that, in the end, was the whole point. She was a woman who decided to care, to stay present, to keep showing up for herself even when the logistics of doing so were undignified and difficult and involved a broken radiator and a window that didn't fully close. She had not given Calvin the satisfaction of breaking. She had not given the situation the satisfaction of making her small again. She had found the mole with her own 2 eyes, armed with nothing but 3 months of paying attention, and a brain that her mother always said was too sharp for a person who also managed to be this funny. She had chosen, on her own terms, from a place of fullness, not desperation. Not because she needed Jae Hong, she had proved comprehensively that she did not need anyone in order to survive, but because she wanted him, because he was honest and complicated and learning how to be a person underneath the empire, and so was she. And there was something in that parallel that felt like the truest foundation she'd ever been offered. Her phone buzzed, a message from Jae Hong. The restaurant confirmed for Saturday, 7 o'clock. "Oh, your mother's recommendation better be worth it," she typed back. "My mother has never steered me wrong in her life, unlike some people I used to know." 3 dots. Then, fair. She pocketed her phone. A new guest appeared at the front desk. Young. First time at the hotel, by the way. She was looking around at everything, carrying a bag that suggested she'd overpacked in the hopeful way people do before trips they've been looking forward to. Coco put both hands on the desk, smiled, the real one. "Welcome to the Lux Resort," she said. "I'm Coco. Let's take care of you." And that is the story of Coco Bailey, the woman who got slapped in her own workplace and slapped back without blinking, who found the mole inside a criminal empire using nothing but a good memory and 3 months of paying attention, who blocked her ex-husband's number without drama and chose a complicated, brilliant man, not because she needed saving, but because she wanted, for the first time in years, to want something for herself. If this story did something to you, and I think it did, drop a comment below right now. Tell me your favorite moment. Tell me if you cried. Tell me if you stood up when she slapped Brittany back. And if you are new to this channel, you just found your people. Subscribe right now. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Like this video because it helps more people find us. And share it with someone who needs a story this good today.